You might love the Crossfire's design or you might hate it, and that's just what Chrysler wanted. The Chrysler Crossfire was a bold design from a revitalized company, buoyed up with thoughts of world domination with its new partner Daimler. Yet despite praise from motoring critics and public interest, the Crossfire was sold for only 5 years. Blink and you'll miss it. How did this innovative design come about, and why did it end so soon? This is the Chrysler Crossfire story. By the mid to late 1990s, Chrysler was starting to punch above its weight. They brought the Jeep brand at just the right time to take advantage of Americans' desires for SUVs. Trucks were taking off and the Dodge Ram was selling nicely, thank you very much. Minivans, something invented by Chrysler, or was it Matra, that's something for another video, were a mainstay of 1990s America. They'd even started to make inroads into the small passenger car market with the Dodge Neon. With a 23% US market share, by some metrics they were doing better than Ford and were the most profitable car company around. Daimler-Benz, or Mercedes to its friends, were also doing pretty well. They'd always focused on luxury cars, and with income levels rising around the world, more and more customers were discovering their cars. Increased road freight helped their van and truck division. Volkswagen, BMW and Daimler were rivals as intense as Ford, GM and Chrysler. Volkswagen made mass-market cars and its luxury division Audi was growing rapidly. BMW had just purchased mass-market car producer Rover. Daimler had started work on mass-market cars. They were soon to launch the A-Class and they were financing the new smart car that would launch in 1998. But these two cars weren't going to conquer the mass car market anytime soon. What they needed was to partner with another car company. A partnership between Daimler and Chrysler seemed to make sense. Chrysler had been making mass-market passenger cars, SUVs, trucks and minivans for years. Daimler was starting down this path, but working with an established player certainly accelerated things. And then there was Chrysler's extensive North American dealer network. For Chrysler's part, they had nothing like Daimler's extensive luxury car lineup and didn't have the global reach Daimler had. When looking for a partnership, one of the key words both sides are always looking for is synergy, the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their parts. That's a fancy way of saying two companies working together are better than two companies working apart. The synergy was strong with these two, so in a shock to the car community, in 1998, Daimler and Chrysler announced the biggest ever merger in automotive history to form Daimler-Chrysler. This would be a merger of equals, not a takeover of one company over another. In the 1990s, car manufacturers were exploring retro modern designs. Volkswagen were bringing back the Beetle, BMW were exploring new Mini designs, and the new acquisition Rover were designing the retro modern Rover 75. Chrysler themselves showed the wild Plymouth Prowler concept in 1993, harkening back to the era of American hot rods. More surprisingly, they brought it to market in 1997, along with a retro-modern PT Cruiser in 2000, offering fun and exciting styled cars, a break from the aerodynamic designs that were robbing passenger cars of their individuality. So when thoughts turned to making Chrysler's first ever sports car to act as a halo car to make the minivan brand a little bit more exciting, it was natural that they would choose a retro modern style penned by new hire and recent college graduate Erik Stoddart. More surprisingly, aged just 25, Erik would become lead exterior designer of the production car. The brief was to make a car that would evoke a strong, passionate, emotional response and split opinion. This car wasn't going to be bland. The Plymouth Prowler had been an exciting statement of intent from a newly invigorated company. Chrysler's new car would be just as daring, but a little bit more practical, drawing inspiration from the powerful shape of classic American coupes while blending in the sophistication of European coupes. The car would be called the Crossfire after the two distinct character lines on the side of the car that crossed just under the mirror. Some have said the new car took cues from such classics as the 1960 Rambler Marlin, but Erik's manager Andrew Dyson said they drew inspiration from another source.
Inspiration from the aesthetics really come from perhaps the Art Deco period and our Chrysler building in New York. A very distinctive mark on the landscape in New York with its Art Deco styling. Very romantic, expressive shapes, which is what we're trying to show with the brand Chrysler right now.
So rather than the Rambler Marlin, maybe 1930s cars such as the Talbot Lego were influences. The interior would be suitably luxurious for a mass car maker who was looking to move up in the world, with the first concept featuring leather and a mass of silver controls. The Crossfire development was going well, but things weren't exactly peachy with the Daimler-Chrysler merger of equals. It was clear one company was more equal than the other, and it wasn't Chrysler. The company hadn't been called Chrysler Daimler after all. Daimler's snobby views of their own car's quality versus their American partner put workers' backs up. Chrysler's Bob Eaton and Daimler's Jürgen Schrempp became joint CEOs, but they didn't talk very often. Many of the executives who'd taken Chrysler to new heights in the 1990s resigned in the 2 years after the merger, and Bob Eaton soon followed them. Shortly after Bob's departure, Jürgen Schrempp publicly admitted that Daimler had always viewed Chrysler as being just a subsidiary. It seems a merger or a takeover needed more than just synergy. The corporate culture clash leading to delays on integrating and misaligned expectations from both management teams were causing serious problems, and this was spilling over to car design and manufacture. Through all this infighting, Chrysler had made significant progress with the Crossfire. The first concept was shown at the 2001 Detroit Motor Show to a warm reception. The Crossfire's shape, especially its long front end, emphasised its rear-wheel drive power. The lines of the car started high at the back and drove downwards to the front. It had a split front windscreen to echo those 1930s Art Deco influences, and the split element held a single central wiper. It had the power to match the looks as well. Chrysler were already well aware how to make performance cars. They'd been producing the highly regarded answer to the Corvette, the Dodge Viper, since 1991. A 2.7-litre supercharged V6 lifted from the Chrysler Sebring was connected to a Dodge Viper rear diff through a 5-speed manual gearbox. It was light as well. Underneath was an aluminium space frame connected to a carbon composite body. This took the prototype to 60 in 5.8 seconds and on to 148 miles an hour, leading Daimler Chrysler to put a G-force meter in front of the passenger. This was something Chrysler hoped could take the fight to Nissan's new 350Z, the Mustang, Audi's TT, or Porsche's Boxster. With such good reception, just 2 weeks after the Detroit Motor Show, approval was given to turn this into a production car. It was a stunning design, but it wasn't making much use of the Daimler side of the business. There wasn't much synergy. Using aluminium and carbon composites for the chassis and the body meant it would be expensive, and producing it at volume would be hard. The public and Daimler's shareholders had seen precious little cooperation between both companies in the past 3 years. All they'd seen was management departures, slower sales, and a dropping share value. What made practical and political sense for Daimler Chrysler was to use the existing Mercedes SLK chassis and transmission for the new Crossfire, and they needed to show something cooperative was happening at Daimler Chrysler, and they needed to show it quickly. So, just 12 months after the launch of the Crossfire concept, the production Crossfire was launched at the LA Motor Show. This was a remarkable feat to pull off. It might look similar, but it was a completely new styling job. The new car was 20 centimeters shorter than the concept, so it could fit on the SLK chassis. With Chrysler's old CEO gone, the new car was introduced by Chrysler's new president and COO, Wolfgang Bernhardt, a Daimler man. He heralded the Crossfire as the first of many children from the new corporate marriage, combining Route 66 with the Autobahn. 39% of it would be Mercedes parts. He was keen to emphasise just how quickly the car had been brought to market, just 2 years. That might have been fast for Daimler, but it was something Chrysler had been doing on a regular basis before the merger. In fact, the cost for Chrysler to produce a car in the 1990s was half that of Ford and almost a third of GM, and much faster too. But just 2 years from concept to production was stretching the truth a little. The production Crossfire was announced in January 2002, but it would be another year before the first Crossfire drove off the production line. Daimler Chrysler was looking to show it was making progress integrating both companies, and the Crossfire was its hastily assembled poster child. That wasn't to say it was some sort of cobbled together Frankenstein's creation though. Chrysler had done a bang-up job adapting its design to Mercedes mechanicals, and in the process had ironed out some of the wrinkles in the prototype. Gone were those awkward front lights that, like the Morgan Aero 8, made it look a little bit cross-eyed. Production volume was expected to be at least 20,000 per year and would be sold worldwide. Surprisingly, given Chrysler production had been dropping and Daimler Chrysler were looking to lay people off, production would be done by an external company, coach builder Karmann. Or maybe given Daimler's view of American workmanship, maybe this wasn't so surprising. So, although it might look like pure Americana, it would be built in Germany. The car would still be rear-wheel drive though, like the prototype, with the SLK's 3.2-litre V6 delivering 215 horsepower. While the front couldn't be quite as long to emphasise that rear-wheel drive power, the rear wheels were larger than the front to produce a similar effect. By basing the car on the SLK, Chrysler could use gadgetry such as Mercedes' Electronic Stability Program or ESP. The automatic gearbox would also come from the SLK, but the 6-speed manual would at least be a Chrysler part taken from cars such as the Jeep Wrangler and the Dodge Nitro. A movable rear spoiler had been a feature of the prototype, as could be seen from the button to manually activate it, but much more was made of it in the 2002 reveal, deploying automatically at freeway speeds. It could be manually controlled as well, so owners could show it off while cruising in city traffic or in their driveway. Inside, the silver and leather was carried over from the prototype, but alas, no G-force meter. In its place was a more practical passenger airbag. Many of the controls were clearly lifted straight from the SLK. Gone was the central pillar in the windscreen, dropped because of the expense of producing a custom wiper mechanism, but probably a good idea to help both visibility and safety. The small cabin wasn't too practical, but then neither was the Nissan 350Z or Mercedes' own SLK for that matter, and both of those sold pretty well. When buying a car like this, practicality wasn't high on customers' lists. As Chrysler said at the launch, this was Chrysler's halo car to do what the Viper did for Dodge. It was also clearly Daimler Chrysler's Art Deco answer to the Bauhaus-inspired Audi TT. True to their word, the Crossfire rolled off the production line in spring 2003, just 2 years since the concept car had been shown. That was a testament to the Chrysler designers who came up with the Crossfire vision, then quickly pivoted to realise their concept on a Mercedes chassis. Chrysler hadn't lost its ability to develop cars quickly, but it showed just how much Daimler and Chrysler were being run separately that 5 years after the merger was announced, the Crossfire was the first car sharing major components, and it had to be rushed to market. What's more, it was based on a 7-year-old chassis that was about to be replaced, not a new chassis that had some years ahead of it. But the Crossfire drove like a Mercedes SLK, and what wasn't to like about that? In fact, Chrysler were able to do better things with the suspension because the already stiff chassis designed for an open top now had a roof on it to make it even stiffer. And it cost $11,000 less, so if you weren't in need of a folding roof and wanted Chrysler's fresh new looks, this was the car to have. The Mercedes automatic gearbox was good, but reviewers didn't like the Chrysler-sourced manual that didn't really engage the driver. But it propelled the car to 60 in 6.5 seconds. That was fast, but less expensive competitors had performance figures that could match or even beat it. Inside, things hadn't changed much from the 2002 reveal. Still gleaming silver that gave the car a touch of class that reviewers felt moved the Chrysler brand upmarket. But now the car was public, it was clear the Crossfire shared more than the 39% of Mercedes components Daimler Chrysler had announced the previous year, maybe to make the car sound more like a Chrysler-Daimler cooperation. To many, it seemed more like 80% Daimler. With Daimler's help, Chrysler took the Crossfire into new markets around the world, including Europe and Australia. Given the warm reception of the Crossfire in 2002, Chrysler had been working on a four-door family car that used its bold Art Deco influences, the Chrysler Airflight. It also harkened back to the Nash Airflight from the late 1940s. The new concept was based on the new Chrysler LX platform that would be used on the new Chrysler 300. Inside, the Airflight took elements from the Crossfire but was clearly developing in a new direction. Initial demand for the Crossfire was strong, and Daimler Chrysler was banking on it drawing customers to their other models. It needed to. All wasn't well in the DC universe. Chrysler sales were falling, and Daimler Chrysler had started laying workers off. Sales of the new Chrysler Pacifica had disappointed. Chrysler was on the top of its game in 1998, but just 5 years later, it was a shadow of its former self. Daimler's backers back in Germany were livid with the performance of the merger. They felt the Daimler Chrysler misadventure was going nowhere. Competitors were running rings around them. Some even called for Daimler Chrysler CEO Jürgen Schrempp to resign. Although initial Crossfire demand was strong, SLKs were down in the US. Was the Crossfire cannibalizing more expensive SLK sales? The Mercedes SLK was an open top when you decided you wanted it to be, and it meant the Crossfire's chassis could easily support an open top, so it was maybe not a big surprise when Chrysler released the Crossfire Roadster in 2004. Reviewers were impressed with how good it looked, almost as if it had been designed as an open top from the outset. It retained its party piece, the automatic rear spoiler. If you're spending $35,000 on a sports car, a cool gadget is a good way to seal the deal. The boot space wasn't exactly large and got a lot smaller when you stored the canvas hood. If you're lucky, you could get a carry-on bag in and not much more. And you could be mistaken for thinking you'd forgotten to put the roof up for all the wind and road noise that you could hear when it was up. Fashions changed quickly, and the new hotness was Mercedes' new second-generation SLK. The Crossfire was using old technology and was yesterday's news. Chrysler had a history of making performance-tuned versions of its mainstream cars. They just released the fire-breathing Dodge Neon SRT4, a 230 horsepower version of their popular family runabout, designed to give Volkswagen's GTI a bloody nose. Daimler's performance team, AMG, had already souped up the Mark I SLK, so again it was no surprise that Chrysler released the Crossfire SRT6, both with and without a roof. The front rear spoiler was replaced by a fixed one. It got body-hugging sports seats, but it was under the bonnet where the action lay. An intercooled supercharger took the power from 215 horsepower to 330. That's oddly around 20 horsepower less than the AMG version of the old SLK. But the competition didn't have anything quite as fast. Maybe Chrysler had created a winner that could boost sales. Reviewers liked the style that was still refreshing, but it was based on 8-year-old technology. It had a steering wheel that couldn't tilt and a sat-nav that got beaten by something you'd stick on your windscreen. The only gearbox on offer was an automatic, and the manual mode suffered from insufferable delays that automatics had at that time. The Crossfire might have the looks, but it wasn't the all-round package that could beat the competition. Sales that had looked so promising when it launched suddenly dissipated. To help promote the Crossfire, Daimler Chrysler did a deal with Overstock.com to list it at up to $8,900 off the list price. It wasn't a completely crazy idea. Online shopping was a new way to reach customers, and Overstock.com already sold luxury brands like Prada and Armani. The marketing stunt backfired though, with news articles saying that the company was trying to shift excess stock because no one was buying them at dealerships. After all, some Crossfires were spending up to 2/3 of a year sitting on dealers' forecourts. With such low sales, the SRT6 performance model had become special order only. The Crossfire's lack of sales seemed to symbolise the problems Daimler Chrysler was having. The combined company's stock price had fallen off a cliff, claiming the head of CEO Jürgen Schrempp in the process. The Chrysler side of the business was losing too much money, and pressure grew to bite the bullet and sign the divorce papers. When Chrysler and Daimler wed in 1998, Chrysler was valued at $35 billion. After looking around for anyone to take what Daimler saw as their American problem child off their hands, they secured a deal with Cerberus Capital Management to take an 80% stake in Chrysler for just $7.4 billion. Daimler, like BMW before them, learned the pain an ill-conceived marriage can cause. The divorce made it hard for Chrysler to keep selling the Crossfire, a car that was 80% Mark I Mercedes SLK, and something Daimler had stopped making themselves 3 years ago. The contract with Karmann to produce the Crossfire was only 5 years, and in fact Karmann had been pressuring for compensation payments because of lower than expected demand. The low sales of the Crossfire meant Chrysler weren't exactly going to be fighting to keep it, so production ended at the end of 2007. So, as suddenly as the Crossfire had appeared, it was gone. Daimler Chrysler had expected to sell at least 20,000 Crossfires a year. They came close, producing around 15,000 a year over 5 years. Any separation is messy, and both companies had started sharing more and more platforms in an attempt to keep this marriage alive. Once entangled, it can be hard to separate car programs. The Dodge Durango, Mercedes ML and GL share the same chassis in 2022, even though the two companies had separated 15 years earlier. Chrysler would fight on as an independent company, but the Great Recession came not soon after, and that sudden shock was too much for fragile Chrysler to bear. It declared bankruptcy in 2009 and was bailed out by the government. But the reason why Chrysler did so well in the 1990s had never really gone away. They still sold SUVs that were still much in demand, and trucks were more popular than ever. Again, sensing synergy, Italian Fiat bought a minority stake in 2011. Like Daimler before them, they saw advantages in sharing common platforms. And what's more, Fiat's, Lancias and Alfa Romeos could find a home in Chrysler's extensive network of North American dealerships. A minority stake turned into full ownership 3 years later, after both management teams saw there was good chemistry between the two companies, a step-by-step strategy that might have prevented the whole Daimler-Chrysler debacle 10 years earlier. But despite a better partner, Chrysler has never been able to get back to the production volume they reached before the ill-fated merger in the late 1990s. And Chrysler has turned its back on sports cars, focusing on what they're known for, family cars and minivans. Daimler and Chrysler talked endlessly about synergy, of both companies becoming more than the sum of their parts. Both companies ultimately failed to do just that. But the Crossfire took the best of Chrysler's imaginative styling department and Daimler's level-headed engineering skills and made something neither company could have produced. The Crossfire was a bright spot in a truly terrible decade for both companies, and one of the few embodiments of Route 66 meets the Autobahn. If you're not done with the Crossfire and want to learn more, check out my optional extra video on the right. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.